Good morning and welcome to the morning news update on Souq News. I am Juvi Ofiene. Despite the Naira reaching a record low of 1,348 Naira.63 per dollar yesterday due to strong demand on the official market, there is optimism in the Central Bank of Nigeria's effort to address the forex backlog. Despite a 33.87% decline from Friday's close, marked at 891 Naira.90, and a release of an additional $500 million by the country's apex bank. This depreciation, the sixth breach of the 1,000 Naira per dollar threshold, has however raised concerns. Despite concerns about inflationary pressures and impact on the households and businesses, the commitment to settling forex backlogs and implementing reforms is expected to stabilize the exchange rate, boost investor confidence, and attract foreign investments. And away from that, Nigeria's newly completed refinery, Dangote Refinery, is expected to diversify crude oil sources, moving from domestic reserves to importing from the United States, according to a release by the company. A recent deal securing 2 million barrels of Midland for February delivery with Trafigura Group signifies a departure from traditional procurement methods. This move showcases Nigeria's adaptability to global oil market dynamics, particularly in response to the U.S. shale revolution, as the refinery aims for its full processing capacity of 650,000 barrels per day. This shift not only boosts Nigeria's energy security, but also disrupts established trade routes. And away from Nigeria to the UAE, where the UAE Sheikh Mansour bin Zayed Al Nahyan, Vice President, Deputy Prime Minister, Chairman of the Presidential Court, and Chairman of the Board of the Central Bank of the UAE, has initiated the inaugural cross-border payment for the UAE Central Bank's digital currency, Digital Dirham, directly with China. The transaction, which amounts to approximately $13.6 million, held at the Abu Dhabi National Exhibition Center, utilized mBridge, a platform that facilitates international fund transfers between participating banks through central bank digital currencies and blockchain. The event also coincided with the Emirates Apex Bank's 50th anniversary. About 1,056 citizens graduated from the ETHRA program, aiming to enhance Emirati representation in the financial sector. And moving on, Brent crude oil prices increased by 0.3 to $82 per barrel, and trading value of 82.65 per barrel at West Texas Intermediate also saw a 0.4% rise to $77.09 per barrel. This followed a drop attributed to concerns over China's demand amid a real estate crisis and the liquidation order for China Evergrande Group. The market tension intensified due to worries about oil supply, sparked by a deadly drone attack in Jordan and escalating US-Iran tensions. Recent events, including a Red Sea tanker assault and the potential impact on Iran's oil exports, contribute to the overall uncertainty. This rise in oil prices precedes an upcoming Federal Reserve rate decision, adding to market stipulation. U.S. stockpile data is expected from the American Petroleum Institute and the Energy Information Administration later this week. And now, Amazon and robot vacuum maker iRobot have abandoned plans to merge due to opposition from EU and US antitrust regulators. iRobot announced a significant restructuring plan, cutting about 31% of its workforce, and its founder, Colin Angle, stepping down as CEO. The EU antitrust chief cited concerns that the acquisition would allow Amazon to hinder iRobot's rivals on the online marketplace. The Federal Trade Commission was reportedly set to reject Amazon's deal before the company withdrew. iRobot expects a 25% reduction in full year 2023 revenue, and Amazon will pay a $94 million termination fee. The abandoned merger reflects Amazon's challenges with competition regulators despite its recent successful deals. And with that, we'll come to the end of the morning news update on Souq News. I am Jovi Ofiene. Early exchange continues with Femi Ayodele and Blessing Eiche. Do have yourself a splendid morning.
All right, thank you, Juvi, for the news update. Now it's time to start a major conversation, and we're going to start from Kenya, where President William Ruto has been accused of embarking on foreign trips other than necessary. Kenyans have had cause to complain in recent times about the foreign trips, even the local trips as well. According to reports, President William Ruto has embarked on 51, trips in the last 1 year to about 34 countries. What is the implication of this to the economy of Kenya? We have a in-house analyst with us. We're being joined by Dr. Idahosa Osamazi to look at this critical issue. Glad you have you join us on Early Exchange this morning.
Femi, good morning. My pleasure to be here.
Good morning,
Blessing.
All right. Our searchlight this morning starting from Kenya, not Nigeria. So interesting, right?
Yeah.
So we're looking at the traveling expenses of the president of Kenya, William Ruto, which has been of concern to the citizens. According to the reports, between the last 1 year, the president has embarked on over 51 trips to about 34 countries. Let me give you a background to this. Says the president has embarked on an average of 3 monthly trips over the last 16 months.
Yeah.
You're smiling. How do you react to this?
I am smiling, and I think this is the malady of all African leaders, and not just President Ruto. We make promises to our people in terms of electionary campaign. We're going to air condition all the major roads and, bring build skyscrapers suspended on the air. And then after winning the elections, the challenge of delivery on this promise become a huge one. And that's why you see many times African leaders are always traveling. I wonder if they themselves ask themselves, how many times do European leaders travel? Those guys are solving their problems. And they are dealing with their issues. They are sitting down with their people, looking at how to make life better for the people. And if they must go out, it has to be on important occasion that is statutory. Here you are having African leaders who have to go to Europe from time to time with cap in hand, looking for money, and all in the name that we are looking for foreign direct investment to build Africa. I think this is one thing that we must have to discourage. Because traveling will not solve the problem. If you look at the rating of Ruto since he took over in Kenya over a year ago, last year in September, some polls were done, and people are scoring him average in terms of performance. In one of the surveys, you see Kenyans said, oh, their lives are even worse off since he came. Now, this tells you the condition that is on the ground, that power is not an end in itself. Power is a means to an end. And you see, we spend huge energy struggling to get power. And now you get power, what to do with that power become a problem. And this is all across Africa. And the problem that is facing us are not problems that we need Europeans to solve. There are some of the problems that we really need to sit down at home and deal with. Kenya is still dealing with the issue of corruption, which of course also is highlighted in that survey. And so you travel and you fritter away state resources, have banquets everywhere and come back home, and then the life of the people is not better for it. And I don't think African leaders should be doing that. There are a whole lot of things that we can do, also putting dignity on our poverty. And I think many African leaders have not learned that.
But it has become customary that when a president assumes office, he makes trips, perhaps to show himself to other world leaders and to build a kind of relationship. Isn't that what
why are you showing yourself to world leaders? You don't need to show yourself to world leaders. You are not ruling them, you are ruling your country. The task that is before every leader is to see how to chart a path for his people. I'm not saying that we cannot solicit for direct foreign investment. You see, we're living in an age of an information overload, that even the people that you are going to meet and sit down to talk with and give them all the rosy picture about what you look like, have access to the same information and data, and even more than you could have.
But the personal visits, personal interaction, pushing for bilateral relationships, don't you think that is what Ruto has been trying to do over the past 16 months?
It does not change anything. You see, investors are looking for havens where their capital can yield returns. And this is an economic decision. It's not a social decision that because a president comes to me and he asks me to bring money to your country, then I carry my money and go and sink in your country when the conditions in your country are not favorable to investment. So these are the issues. African leaders should first and foremost sit down, appraise the situation, and understand why people are not coming to do business with them, and create that enabling environment first and foremost, so that
word and then to businesses as well. So it's all for you.
who are the ship owners. So this is substantial, and this of course take a toll on them. So all the gains that would have made several months back, then of course this particular claim period wipe them out. So it's going to be some losses, but I don't think it's something that's too substantial right now. At the moment, maybe 2 or 3 vessels attacked will not be sufficient to wipe out the insurance company. And I think for the peace period that they have enjoyed in the last 3 or 4 or 5 years, when this was not happening, they should be able to still stand if they were capitalized, depending on which country of origin that these insurance companies may be located.
I'm wondering, in all this, what's the role of Russia? You know, what influence will Russia have or has on, this kind of crisis? And what could be the vested interest here as far as Russia is concerned?
Well, like I said to you, we are gradually gravitating toward a power front in politics today, that whether we like it or not, yes, people can still talk about multilateralism, but I don't see that working anymore, really, because there's no small center power anywhere. So it's either you are here or there. So if you're not with the US, you must be with Russia, China. So that's where we are. So this is where the world has found itself again. And we are at the throes of a very difficult challenge. But I think nature has some of all these crises. And that's why you are seeing a whole lot of gluts in China also happening. And then, of course, they're also concerned about trade. Russia itself is having to cope with the NATO forces in its war against Ukraine. This is also affecting its economy real dearly. So here, yes, it may not be anything good for anybody. This is not good for anybody. And I don't think there's such vested interest real here. But what also we must have to look at is what level of authority do these nationals have over these terrorists? Well, what else? You see, it's one thing for you to be able to say, okay, I supply you a weapon, and then we give you oil in return, or we give you something else. That means that's where the relationship ends. But they cannot command you to say, go on war or stop war. Because the goals or the objective of this crisis may not be the same to either Russia or to Iran or those concerned from Yemen. So Yemen, this is the real issue here. So you have a world here where everybody has an interest to protect. And now, in those days, they call it in international relations, mutual assured destruction. That's the situation where we find ourselves, because if this thing persists, it's not just going to affect only China or America, it's also affecting Russia, because their grain cannot enter into Africa also. So I think they should also be very concerned about what is happening at the Red Sea, because their vessels will pass also. So this is where they to themselves are also worried, and they must also really be talking about it. But it's unfortunate that at the 12-hour meeting with between the U.S. officials and the Chinese officials, really for me, when you are serious about diplomatic issues, head of state should meet.
Well, this time around, the conclusion from that meeting is there's going to be a phone conversation between the U.S. president and that of China. Do you think that will make any impact?
Well, phone conversation, I don't know what impact that can make. That phone conversation is different from table talk, where people sit down around table and I can be looking at your eyes and know what you are feeling and what you are thinking in your mind. So this is also very important. And this is a problem the world has found itself in recent time, where we're having only old men govern the global space. And this is quite not good. So because they can't travel, they can't move, the mobility is rigid. And this is why this is all having this space. If we'll have a younger president in America, I could take a flight the next day and say, okay, let me meet this guy up in China and say, look, what's the real issues? Let's talk about it. So take pride aside and then face the diplomatic issues. And then you can get real solution. Making telephone call will not stop the issue, really, for me. I think it should be much more than a telephone call. Since America is the one who is actually pursuing peace at the moment, and I think they should do it with every of the strength and energy they have to actually drive this process. Because it's not China. If China is the one that's actually the one that is trying to drive this process of negotiation, then of course, Pink should be in America to see the American president and sit down with him one-on-one and say, let's resolve these issues. But I think, you see, ego is a big problem here. And China is becoming egocentric, and of course, America has always been there on a high ego, and then they feel that they rule or own the entire world. But people are saying, no, that's not correct. So this is where, for me, that conversation needs to be elevated. It needs people to sit down, shake hands, and agree on something that is concrete, that both parties can take to the Congresses, and then they resolve the issues and they deal with it.
Do you see any connection with politics here? You know, the American election is near, is coming soon. And do you think how Joe Biden handles this crisis will have an influence on his rating?
Well, of course, there's no how. If it's going to have economic implications, definitely it will also have political implications. You see, if you manage your relationship with other people very well, it also affect how you look as rate you in terms of your efficiency. And this is what it is. And people would now begin to remember themselves and say, oh, if it was the day of Donald Trump, this cannot happen. These are where Biden need to actually leverage his contact and connection with China to solve this problem. And if he's unable to use it, and it's a very low ebb here, it will continue to affect the way he's seen politically, whether it's a weakling or somebody who is inefficient when it comes to diplomatic relationships. So he needs to prove a point, and prove that point to the American voters, definitely. So if it's affecting economy, it will sure affect politics, and that's for sure. So, but it's not that people who are on the right are doing it because American election is close. No. The real truth of the matter is that they have been there. It's not today, it's not yesterday, it's not last year. They have been there even before he came. And it's just that by the way Trump has positioned America during his tenure in the 4 years was to say, American for America, we really don't care what's happening on the outside. So they were not putting eyes on what was happening in the international scene as much as it affects the American interests. So the places that Donald Trump will go to will be things that America can easily leverage on as it's affecting their trade or whatever interest that America hold in those spots. So he was not so much about being here or there, which of course is the hallmark of democratic governance. They want to see how every country in the world is doing, including looking at moral issues in countries. So Donald Trump wasn't really concerned about those issues while he was a president. But here you are seeing an American president who is interested in everything, everywhere. And then, of course, you're spreading your tentacle. And the debt burden on the American citizen is getting to the rooftop. Put at last month at about every American citizen is owing about 102,000 US dollars in debt.
All right. So, if America is able to negotiate very well with with China at this time, and the attack at the Red Sea stops, what about the Middle East? Do you see that translating to peace in the Middle East? Is it just America that is fundamental to bringing peace? Or even within the Middle East, there are issues within themselves that needs to be resolved?
Yeah, but you see, what America is trying to do with China is not really because China has the key to what is happening in the Red Sea. China doesn't have the key. Now, what America is thinking is that, look, if Iran is funding these people, and the greatest buyer of Iranian oil is China. Now, if China stops buying Iranian oil, then Iran will not have money to give to these people. Probably they will run out of fund, and then probably the war will end. So that is just a calculation. But who say Iran will not sell oil to other people? Who say India will not be ready to buy oil from Iran? Who says Russia will not be ready to buy oil from Iran? So these are the issues that, for me, that's making it really very complex. Because you're not having, as if that, you see, when you call the Chinese president will call the head of the Houthi rebels and say, okay, please stop, and they will stop. No, that possibility is remote. What is in here is, okay, help us put sanction on these people. So if you sanction them,
war.
Yeah, so that's, which is of course still war, and it makes it even more severe and dire. And we also have to look at the implication of that on the Chinese economy that is suffering a glut at the moment because of overcapacity. They have produced so much, and so much is lying down, is not being sold. I was reading the news this morning where, of course, I think in Switzerland, were complaining that they are going to be closing down their solar panel, even in Germany also, because they are looking at American, Chinese coming to undersell their products in those regions. So the Chinese economy is also threatened. So China also is also very conscious of whatever that happens, so that at the end of the day, there will be a revolution even within China, because when people are hungry, only one thing is left. If you have nothing to live for, you can die for anything.
Let's discuss now how to de-escalate this kind of crisis. Do you see any military approach helping this? Globally, you always resort to the issue of having roundtable conversation. But here you have a rebel group, maybe you can put it like a terrorist group where terrorism is at play here. What are the risk factors here? If perhaps you want to invite this kind of group to a roundtable discussion to see a kind of extending hands of fellowship rather than using a military approach here, what would be, or what are the risk factors?
You see, it is to understand the psychology of the man you are dealing with. The man you are dealing with is just to prove a point. And what is this point? That they are significant and they are relevant. And so that's why I say to you, the only way to deal with this issue is relationship building. And it's to let the man know that you are very relevant. We agree that you are significant.
How? The rebel group?
Yes, with the rebel group.
How would that turn out? That's why the risk factors here.
Yeah, but what you're saying to them is that we know that you are significant. Put your cards on the table. What are the issues here? You want some equity in your country, which is Yemen. How do we address the issue so that we can have a truly democratic democratic Yemen, where the minority group, what is playing out globally, it's not just only in Yemen. If you even look at the issues that affect us as a country in Nigeria, you see the security challenge that we face is also related in some sort to this issue of dealing with minority groups. There's a problem where the minority feels that they are disempowered and they cannot have, what they want by peaceful means. So the only way to get it is through violent means. So if peaceful revolution become impossible, then violent revolution becomes inevitable. This is what you're saying. So a lot of people are feeling, okay, see, if I'm not significant, and you say, okay, let's go to votes, your vote will not count. So if vote is not going to count in a democracy, because it's democratic, it's majoritarian ethic, number wins. So if my vote is not going to count, and therefore I have to wait till eternity to even get my right. So what do I need to do? Disrupt the system. And that's why I'm saying that the only way to deal with this issue is to be truly democratic about it. Democracy, as defined by the American legend, is the government of the people, by the people, and for the people. It's not the government of a majority over the minority. So which means at play here is power sharing arrangement. And I think Canada had demonstrated this in the form of the kind of democracy they practice, which is constitutional democracy, where powers are shared among the constituent units in the federation. So this is the options that are available, that we can put the cards on the table to say, what actually do you want? And we look at the possibility, because if we say, okay, let's go to vote, vote will not solve these issues. And so what will solve the issue is this relationship, to say, okay, we recognize your need. It's not that we are giving a thumb up to your terrorist action, but that we are understanding the underlying philosophy of your violence. Now, if we address this issue, will you drop violence? And then we start to engage with the Yemen government and see how they can accommodate this minority interest. And then you find peace in Yemen, then the rest say we find peace.
Well, doing this would mean that America has to come to the position of wanting to negotiate with them. And over time, they've held the position that you don't negotiate with terrorists, except they are not considering these rebels as such.
Yeah, but that's a position you have had. What I'm saying in essence is that in the era of the 20th century, these were possibilities. Where you have, power measured in terms of the arsenal that you have built, the size of your army, the size of your resources that you command. Today, world power is no longer conceptualized in terms of hardwares. There's a software dimension to it, and I think Americans should be at the forefront of understanding this reality. That power calculus has changed, and if power calculus changes, then the way we handle power also need to change. So when you're seeing that people are creating trouble, and what do? You engage them in such that you can also empower them economically so that those troubles stop, because the trouble is not good for anybody. That's the point. You remember what Yadwa did when the Niger Delta was boiling. It was a simple arrangement. Make peace with the militants. Some of them were sent abroad to go and do schools. Some of them were engaged and giving contract and the rest of it. And what happened? Militancy died down. Because you must not be dealing with the symptoms. We must look at the root of the issues. What are the roots? The root is that these people from the northern Yemen feel that they are disenfranchised. And this is what is leading to the protest. So it's a local politics that is transmuting into an international one. And therefore, if you have to deal with it, then you have to go to the roots, to solve it at the roots, and then you can have your peace.
Okay, we do hope that this happens quickly so that the world can have some peace and then global trade can continue without any hitch. Thank you so much, Idausa Osamaze, for your submissions on the show today.
My pleasure to be here.
Let's go on a quick break and return to look at another matter. Stay tuned.
Tafawa Balewa Square, TBS. Tafawa Balewa Square was initially used as a horsing ground called Lagos Race Course. The edifice was constructed by General Yakubu Gowon in 1972 and named after Nigeria's first Prime Minister, Sir Tafawa Balewa. Tafawa Balewa Square is located at 45/57 Masi Bangboshe Street on Lagos Island, Lagos, and referred to as TBS. TBS is a 50,000-seater capacity venue and houses the Remembrance Arcade, the 26-story Independence House, which at a time was the country's tallest building. When Lagos served as the country's seat of government, the National Assembly Complex was within the TBS. Also in the square are the National Broadcasting Commission Office, the Nigerian Hydrological Services Agency Office, shopping centers, travel agencies, restaurants, car parking lots, and a bus terminal. Tafawa Balewa Square is adorned with beautiful statues of white horses and red eagles, symbols of strength and dignity. Our historic neighbors include the King's College and the Holy Cross Cathedral. Tafawa Balewa Square hosted some of the country's memorable events, such as the Independence Day in 1960, when Nigeria gained independence from Britain, the Armed Forces Remembrance Day, which is celebrated annually on January 15. The edifice is a national cultural asset. Tafawa Balewa Square, Souq Enlightenment. Good morning and welcome to Early Exchange with Blessing Aiche, Femi Ayodele, Sam Oruwoje, and Idahosa Osama.
The deficit budget, we're still going to borrow as much as up to 7-9 trillion.
We have a 24-hour rescue team always on standby.
As Nigerians, we must realize that government does not thrive based on what one man is doing at the seat of power.
If I had my way, I would say let's go back and bring Nigerian broadcasting.
This is Early Exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.
All right, having talked about the trouble at the Red Sea, let's look at Africa right now. As some countries that used to be part or that are part of the ECOWAS, I'm talking about Burkina Faso, Niger, and of course Mali, announcing that they're pulling out of the ECOWAS, even though according to the ECOWAS, they haven't received a formal notification from these countries that they're pulling away from the ECOWAS. What will be the implication on Africa as these three countries choose to pull out from the ECOWAS? What roles have the ECOWAS been playing in the affairs of these countries since the troubled times? And I'm referring to the coup that have happened in these countries. Okay, these are some of the issues that we'll discuss at this time, as we'll be joined virtually by Jide Ologun Esquire, who's also a global affairs analyst. Good morning, Jide.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure.
We thank you for making time to be with us on the show today. All right, first let's start with the ECOWAS as a regional body. What role does the ECOWAS play or is supposed to play in the affairs of its member countries?
Thank you very much. ECOWAS was established by the Treaty of Lagos. That should be 28th of May, 1975. And that treaty has been revised in July 1993. And as the name implies, it is the economic community of West African states. And in French, you call it CEDEAO, and Portuguese also. And it's meant to be a regional political and economic union of 15 countries that collectively has estimated population of about 420 million people. So you expect that should be a huge market, economically speaking. And the principal goal of ECOWAS is to achieve collective self-sufficiency, for member states by creating a single large trade bloc and building full economic and trading union, which will have impact on the political lives of the nations that are there. But going down the lane, from 1975 till date, the big question to ask is that how well has ECOWAS done in delivering on this? And that is one of the excuses given by the nations that are threatening to pull out now. When the coup d'etat took place, it was based on the complaint of economic marginalization and backwardness for the people, that the resources available within the nations do not reflect in the good lives that should be, presented to the citizens. And right now, the ECOWAS community is trying to persuade and at the same time impose sanctions on these countries to return to democratic system of government, and in response to the sanctions, three of them have come together now to say, okay, we are pulling out completely from ECOWAS, and that is sending a future signal that if that is successfully carried out, then the fear is that other nations may start looking in the direction of reintroducing military rule and interventions that is being phased out by ideal democracy. So it appears from the outcomes of the existence of ECOWAS that much has not been delivered to the citizens of the nations that comprise ECOWAS. So, and that you want, okay. You were going to ask a question?
All right, Bryce Gideologun, good to see you again. It's been a while.
Thank you very much.
Now let's look at the underlying factors here. The military leaders of these countries decided on Sunday to withdraw their membership from the regional bloc, which is ECOWAS. What are the issues fueling this kind of unusual development?
Primarily, the impact of the sanctions on those nations. And, we have issues of perception here now in public relations to talk about perception. Those who plotted a coup and took over to establish military rule over those nations are of the perception that the government hitherto, was not delivering to the citizens what should be. And apart from that, the complaints from some of them is that their former colonialists, kept exploiting them, throwing them into poverty while getting enriched by the resources. You need to go and find out the resources that are available in Niger Republic, for instance. Those resources should be enough to make Niger maybe the 5th richest country in the world. You see, so these are issues. The same underlying factors that we make those who plan coup to say we are kicking this government out of office: corruption, maladministration, poverty, not delivering on the expectations of leadership. And at a point, ECOWAS was trying to, scream and use force, but the kinetic approach may not help the situation, particularly now that you have 3 nations forming a bloc. And my argument at the time was that ECOWAS should be proactive in ensuring that we have mechanism within ECOWAS that we make leaders of the different nations develop their countries and deliver the dividends of good governance to their citizens, which now prevents military intervention, at least to a reasonable extent. But in a situation where, as some know, Africa has about 40% of the total resources in the world, and yet accommodates a huge percentage of the poor citizens of the world, then questions will be raised by some. How are these resources engaged? And that is why one of the reasons given by those that brought in the military intervention, and ECOWAS has been trying to persuade them, let's talk, negotiate and things like that. But the effect of the sanction is getting tougher. So the three of them are saying, okay, if we are not likely to get support from this ECOWAS region, let's form our own bloc. And in public relations, particularly the 1978 Mexican statement, is the art and social science of monitoring trends and predicting their consequences. So it's about their consequences. Now, this is going to impact security in Africa, in West Africa. For instance, these countries are close borders to Nigeria, neighboring countries. Before now, under the tenure of the former President Muhammadu Buhari, Niger Republic was like a twin brother to Nigeria. In fact, the president invested so much constructing rail line to Niger Republic. He even said at the time that only God can manage the border of Nigeria and Niger. Now that border is short. They are not doing business with Nigeria. They are not even friends of Nigeria. And so, not to start with, the investment of the former president in Niger Republic is locked up now. How strategic that decision was is a different thing. And so, and when this bloc are now reinforcing their relevance within ECOWAS, other nations will be monitoring them, because there are agitations in some West African countries about the level of poverty, about the level of insecurity, about the level of absence of good governance. So, and that is why ECOWAS should be concerned. And of course, we know that Nigeria is the headquarters of ECOWAS. So, and that is why this matter should be handled with utmost diligence. And I understand that there was a group from ECOWAS expected to meet in Niamey, but due to logistic issues, they could not fly out of Abuja. And these are part of the issues we are talking about. So it may appear that not much seriousness is given to this issue. And when you talk about military intervention, you know the level of force that may be embraced by military engagement. So we need to prevent the democracy that is being nurtured in West Africa from, being encroached upon, because that would be sending a very harsh signal to the protection of democratic tendencies. But on the other side also, the drivers of democracy should be seen to deliver on the mandate of democracy. Democracy is the government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And let me say this, coming to Nigeria, for instance, and picking it from our grand norm, the Constitution. You look at Section 14, subsection 2 of the Nigerian Constitution 1999 as amended. It says clearly that the security and the welfare of the citizens shall be the primary purpose of government. So let me now ask you this big question. How many countries within West African region can claim to have secured the citizens and to have provided meaningful welfare to their citizens? And these are questions that are plaguing us.
So these political issues, how do you think is going to affect regional trade or trade within the West African region?
Definitely is impacting it negatively. We've had informal reports of hostility within the ECOWAS region. We have the ECOWAS passport, we have treaties that should enable us to move freely, but that is not the case. And so we have not been able to synchronize the efforts of member states. Like I said earlier, there should be 15 states within the ECOWAS region, and the aim is to create collective self-sufficiency. And how do you do that? By creating a single large trade bloc and building a full economic and trading union. So how do you trade with Nigeria Republic, for instance? How do you trade with Burkina Faso, for instance? So these are issues. You know, even those that are still under democratic system of government, how fluent is the relationship? We were reading at a time the hostility of Ghana to business concerns of Nigerians there. So West Africa is yet to come together to maximize the benefits of the economic population. And I place that at about 420 million all the time. And the huge resources, the productive potentials, and these are serious issues that should concern us. Africa, and by being specific, West Africa has no business with poverty. I did a research, global one, and it will amaze you that about 40% of the whole resources in the world are domiciled in Africa. And the population of Africa is just about 1.5 billion. And you throw that into the around 8.2 billion of the world population, then you now see the huge potentials in terms of resources that Africa has. So what we lack generally is the resourcefulness to maximize our resources by creating commonwealth for common good. Though some countries in Africa are doing well. You talk about Mauritius, you talk about Botswana, you talk about Rwanda, you talk about Egypt, you know, and some countries like that. So, and these are issues. And in the absence of good governance, in the absence of security and welfare for the citizens, crises are inevitable.
All right. Now let's make reference to the treaty that led to the formation of ECOWAS in 1975. Over the years, there have been issues around the credibility of ECOWAS. In fact, there's a clip I'm going to play for you now. I'd like you to take a listen where the former head of state, Gowon, talked about these issues in 1975. I would like you to take a listen and then you will react to it.
It is also my sincere hope that our deliberations at this meeting will set us firmly on the road to the fulfillment of our commonly held aspirations for greater effective cooperation of the countries of West Africa and a more cohesive and prosperous sub-region as part of and contributing to a progressive and equally prosperous continent. This is a momentous day, marking as it does the fulfillment of many hopes, the result of persistent efforts on the part of leaders from all corners of West Africa, another major and concrete step in giving practical effects to aspirations which we all share and which in various previous meetings, conferences and groups, we have all endeavored since the beginning of the last decade to bring to fruition.
All right, the former president here, the former military head of state here, raised concerns about the collaborations between the bloc. Now, let me read to you the concerns being raised by some of these military leaders. They allege that the bloc has moved away from the ideals of its founding fathers and Pan-Africanism. I would like you to react to this. What's your take to this in respect to the concern raised by the former military head of state and the allegations by these military leaders that ECOWAS has deviated from the ideas of its founding fathers and Pan-Africanism. How do you react to that?
Basic issue there. If you go back to creation, in Genesis chapter 1, verse 28, God blessed man and he said, be fruitful, multiply, replenish the earth. And so the essence of having the government structure is to replenish, to improve, to enhance the fortunes of the people. And those are the ideals of the founding fathers. All right. And General Gowon, the former military head of state of Nigeria, mentioned it in his speech now. Prosperity, cohesion. So can we claim that that prosperity vision has been achieved in West Africa? So those are the issues. Those are the issues. Can we claim that we are really, truly together by the way we operate? Even bringing it down to the micro space, Nigeria. Nigeria has 6 geopolitical zones. Nigeria had 3 dominant tribes. How coherent, how cohesive have we come together to maximize the huge opportunities available for prosperity? Are we not being torn apart by ethnic sentiments, by religious sentiments? Are we not being plagued by all thieves, cabals who set up themselves against the nation? And these are issues. So when you talk about the ideals of founding fathers, that is why I took it back to the father of all fathers, God himself. When God created so many blessings in the Garden of Eden, it was to bless humanity. So can we claim that the resources in West Africa have been engaged by our leaders to bless the people within the region? I've done some comparative researches. For instance, let's isolate Ghana. Ghana has gold. The UK has coal. And Buckingham Palace is decorated by gold. Is any palace decorated by gold in Ghana? Nigeria has the largest deposit of proven gas in Africa. So how much do we buy gas in Nigeria here? We have oil in abundance that we cannot refine. So these are issues. So when you talk of ideals mean what should be in place. So have we not deviated from the developmental course of life? Because the sign of life is growth, is development. So can we claim to have developed? 1975, if I roll back now, in 1975, I was in primary school. I entered secondary school in 1977. So these are issues. And look at where we are today in West Africa. So these are issues. So and that's why I mentioned earlier that the military intervention will come under an excuse. And we are even talking about the local issues now. What about the global issues? Because some of the complaints also is that the former colonialists have been exploiting the region with the collaboration of local leaders. There are several mineral resources in West Africa. Look at Nigeria, for instance. I just mentioned the issue of oil theft. Who are these oil thieves? Why should we export our crude oil for refining in Europe, in other parts of the country, of the world? Bring part of the products home, forfeit the other products to them, and now we are crying foul that a dollar exchanges for 1,300 naira in the parallel market. So who do we blame, God or the devil? Because in Nigeria specifically, oil was discovered in commercial quantity in 1956. We became a producer in 1958. The first refinery was commissioned in 1965, built by Shell. We have 4 national refineries that came to comatose recently, to the point that we spend about 100 billion naira for the turnaround maintenance. And we are still in the red ocean of even trying to revive that vital sector of our national life. So these are issues. These are issues in West Africa. So I think we should be sustainable, in our thinking right now. Put Africa of the future on the table. That what can we I see the United Nations helped us. I think 2015 or 2016, the Sustainable Development Goals were placed on the table that will be evaluated in 2030, just about 6 years from now. So how much of it have we done? Even though I know a country like Rwanda is keeping pace with the goals. And there is also provision for partnership. So these are issues. So we appear not to have woken up at all in West Africa to the expectations of development. And that's why these three guys are saying, okay, let's see what we can do. But how well also they can deliver as military leaders is a different question. But when I went back to study public relations, we learned something in the classroom that concerning the style of government, let fools argue. And so it may be that their leadership style will deliver development to the people. After all, if you go to Singapore, that was translated from a little coastal region with little resources to a place that is like the best place to live and work in the world, one of the best places in the world now by Lee Kuan Yew. Lee Kuan Yew did not practice the ideal democracy way. He combined autocracy with everything, and he told the world that leave me and my people. You see, Sheikh Zayed that developed the UAE from a desert to a modern paradise also did not follow the democratic principles, you know, as espoused in that definition. But this man said that wealth is not money, but developing the people. So how well can we claim that the people in West Africa have been developed to add value to themselves and add value to the society? So these are several issues that we have. That's why I am personally challenging ECOWAS now to go back to the drawing board. The drawing board is still there, and look out of the window and re-strategize towards a secured future. Otherwise, we may be drifting in the direction of a mortgaged future.
All right, in doing that, because the ECOWAS intends to negotiate with these countries, and one of the reasons that the three countries have given for wanting to pull out of the ECOWAS is the way the ECOWAS handled what they refer to as taking their destinies in their own hands with a coup. Is there a different approach ECOWAS could have used? And in going forward by negotiating with these countries, are there issues or are there things the ECOWAS should bring to the table to extend a hand of friendship to these countries in trying to win them back?
Absolutely. We have the kinetic, which is diplomacy. Sit down, negotiate. Conflict is inevitable. Or you get to the table, and in resolving conflicts, there are about 5 steps. I may mention few. Identify what the problem is, which is critical, because if you don't start from there, you only be handling symptoms and not the root causes. What are the problems? What are the threats? Why are you afraid that we cannot continue with this? What new thing are you bringing? How can we understand one another? How do we come to the point of agreement? And how do we prompt resolutions? And how do we keep faith with the resolutions for implementation purpose? The only thing that is constant is change. At a time, the military head of state, General Gowon, retired, that we listened to earlier, said that the problem of Nigeria was not money or what to do with the money. But look at it today. What is the indebtedness rate of Nigeria? So we need to look ahead. So let all parties sit down. And a wise man said, you first seek to understand before you are understood. So when you come to that negotiation table, you must keep your minds open, you know, and the most important thing is to look out of the window and look at the people. I mean, many watched how the people were rejoicing when the coup took place. That is a non-verbal, a combination of verbal and non-verbal communication. So it's about the people. The resources of the land are there for the people. And some have complained that the global stakeholders are trying to manipulate. If that is the case, who says that West Africa cannot come out and begin to develop their region and maximize their resources? So these are issues. For how long do we play slaves to those who enslaved us earlier? So those are the issues. It's all about negotiation and fulfilling promises and keeping faith with resolutions. And I hope that these new leaders we are talking about are sincere about moving their nation to greater heights. If that is the case, I mean, let's see how we can, and maybe other countries will learn from them, because there are other countries in West Africa too that practice democracy and have little to show for democracy. So in terms of development, and somebody threw a challenge to me recently that, are we even learning from the developed countries? And my answer was quite direct and simple, that if we are learning from developed countries, by now we should have been developed. You see, so these are issues. What are our priorities? Is it about the luxury of office, flamboyance, leadership lifestyle at the expense of developing institutions that we attract wealth? For instance, in public relations, you don't talk about foreign direct investment if you don't have a stable and secure environment, because the investor is in business. He wants to be sure that his investments are secure. So it doesn't matter, you can go around the world soliciting for investment. You won't have it unless and until you secure your environment. These are issues. These are issues. I told you about Singapore. Big brands do business in Singapore because in the doctrine of wealth creation and wealth sustainability, the first thing you do is to create a wealth magnet locally that will attract foreign investment. So you build infrastructure, you build the culture of ease of doing business, you assure those who come to invest that they will reap from their investments. Look at Nigeria, for instance, now. The aviation sector, many foreign airlines have their money trapped within the economy of the nation. How will they be encouraged to come and invest, even when some investors in the country are jetting out of the country? So these are issues that should concern ECOWAS. ECOWAS should drop their garments of honor and status and get down to business. How can West Africa be repositioned? Let me say this. God has blessed West Africa excellently. I just gave us an instance. Do they have cocoa in Switzerland? You start talking about some of the best chocolates, they're from Switzerland. Okay, now we have oil and gas in abundance. We cannot even refine the oil. So the wiser ones who have developed to the secondary level of refining the crude product are the ones benefiting. You see, and that is why it should be difficult to tame the exchange rate that is embarrassing us. So let West Africa wake up. Let Africa wake up. Wake up and maximize your resources. And I stand to be corrected. The resources of West Africa account hugely for what is used to develop the developed countries. And that is why the partitioning of Africa was of interest to them. Because of are you talking of human resources? Right now, how many medical doctors are left in West Africa? They are all seeking greener pastures. And those countries are marketing seriously to mop them out of West Africa to come and drive and build their own economies. For how long do we continue with that? And let me say this, if you think you are enjoying the pleasures of office now, one day you'll be out of office. So what kind of society would you have contributed to developing? See, so these are issues. So this is a critical moment in history now. But I'm advising they should go to the negotiation table, put the main issues on the table. What are the fundamental crises that we have here now? And not just the symptoms. And you see how you learn from one another, come to an understanding, and you move on. And like I said, West Africa has no business with poverty at all. And again, it's instructive to know that these guys are from the Sahel region, and you know the import of that when you talk about all this terrorism and then you understand what I'm saying. So we really need to handle this matter with caution. And under industrial psychology, you have what we call reinforcement theory. So if this is not well handled, we may be reinforcing the reintroduction of military interventions in West Africa, and I doubt if that is the way to go now. And one of the critical solutions to that is to bring good governance and development to the people. When people have a sense of belonging and they enjoy themselves, it should be difficult for some juntas to come from somewhere and say that they want to take over.
All right, that's quite interesting. We need to go on a short break now. We'll be right back to discuss more on the issue of exit of these countries from ECOWAS. Stay with us.
Tafawa Balewa Square, TBS. Tafawa Balewa Square was initially used as a horsing ground called Lagos Race Course. The edifice was constructed by General Yakubu Gowon in 1972 and named after Nigeria's first Prime Minister, Sir Tafawa Balewa. Tafawa Balewa Square is located at 45/57 Masi Bangboshe Street on Lagos Island, Lagos, and referred to as TBS. TBS is a 50,000-seater capacity venue and houses the Remembrance Arcade, the 26-story Independence House, which at a time was the country's tallest building. When Lagos served as the country's seat of government, the National Assembly Complex was within the TBS. Also in the square are the National Broadcasting Commission Office, the Nigerian Hydrological Services Agency Office, shopping centers, travel agencies, restaurants, car parking lots, and a bus terminal. Tafawa Balewa Square is adorned with beautiful statues of white horses and red eagles, symbols of strength and dignity. Our historic neighbors include the King's College and the Holy Cross Cathedral. Tafawa Balewa Square hosted some of the country's memorable events, such as the Independence Day in 1960, when Nigeria gained independence from Britain, the Armed Forces Remembrance Day, which is celebrated annually on January 15. The edifice is a national cultural asset. Tafawa Balewa Square, Souq Enlightenment. Morning and welcome to Early Exchange with Blessing Aiche, Femi Ayodele, Sam Oruwoje, and Idahosa Osamans.
The deficit budget, we're still going to borrow as much as up to 7-9 trillion.
We have a 24-hour rescue team always on standby.
As Nigerians, we must realize that government does not thrive based on what one man is doing at the seat of power.
If I had my way, I would say let's go back and bring Nigerian broadcasting.
This is Early Exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.
To know you're still there with us. This is still Early Exchange. Just to let you know that you can be part of this conversation by going on our social media platform, my YouTube page at Souq News, for you to share your view. Let your voice be heard. What's your take on the exit of these three countries from ECOWAS? You have Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. What's your take on these? What's your impression? What do you think will be the outcome of this for the African continent? And then what do you expect of the big brother of the Africa, of the West Africa, which is the ECOWAS, to do in a circumstance like this? Blessing? Let me find out from you. You know, there are a lot of people who feel, okay, the options could be a military approach. On the other hand, there are others who feel that could be too risky, looking at the fact that these three countries, they are familiar with coups, and you have military leaders already, and somehow they have alliance with Russia, who in the recent times has been providing support through the Wagner groups and some of the activities going on backdoor to support their military base and all that. There are others who feel, okay, there's a need to go to the negotiation table. The ECOWAS using its influence to see how that can be done. What's your take?
Well, I will rule out any military intervention at this point because so far we've seen it did not even work. When they tried that threatening when the Niger coup happened. So I think it's a time for bodies, international, global bodies, regional bodies to begin to understand that it is not always that route. I'll use the example of a father to a child. You know, when you beat a child often, it gets to a point the child grows and becomes used to that beating and can even withstand the father in terms of strength. And when some parents go that route over time, that's when you get cases of a father or a child fighting the parent because that child can match your strength. So in this case, it's an issue of peace. What do we want for Africa? It is development and not destruction, because any military force will have a retaliation and that will in turn result into destruction. So what we want is development. So negotiation should be the order of the day and not the use of force. But thankfully our guest is back. He'll stay here. I'm talking about Jide Ologun, who is a legal practitioner and also a global affairs analyst to respond to this. Now, in the event that ECOWAS, after negotiation, fails to restore those countries back to the body, what happens to ECOWAS as a body, and what signal would it send to the rest of the West African region? Please unmute your mic so we can hear you.
In the course of events that
Okay,
redefine the vision. And let me say this. At a time we were under the colonial masters, at a time we opted out. We didn't get it easily. And that changed the narrative. And I think we are at the threshold of that now, as these three nations are saying, okay, we are tired of ECOWAS because we are not seeing your positive impact. And the message for ECOWAS is now to re-strategize and become more relevant. Go back to the vision and the mission of ECOWAS when it was established in 1975 and again revised, and see where they have gone astray. And I can help ECOWAS by talking about national development. What is national development? The improvement of a country in all areas, including the political, the economic, social, scientific, material, and cultural spheres. And nations are evaluated based on the capacity to enhance its citizens' standards of living, which is a critical indicator in national development. Why are your citizens running to other countries? That will help you. And there are about 8 phases, about 5, expanding industries. Can we even claim to be an industrial hub? That's a big question. Investing in your education, how you develop your social cohesion, how you promote your culture and the values, how you turn your agrarian agricultural ventures to agroeconomy. You see, how you manage your religious institutions to ensure that they add values that are globally relevant. All right. And basically, you must do the political, the scientific, the cultural, the economic, the material, and the social, because these are critical to the fabric. So putting ECOWAS on the table now, they need to do what is called SWOT analysis. That how well have we done? What are our strength values? What about the weaknesses that we have demonstrated? What are the opportunities for us? And what are the threats? Recently, the Vice President of Nigeria was in Switzerland for an economic conference, and he said he was there to market the potentials of Nigeria, and I quite agree with that. But you see, you may need to do less marketing if your environment is business friendly. So it may be better that he returns home to sit down at the Federal Executive Council and they take a decision and be determined to return this nation to a secured environment season that will now give the foreign investors the confidence to come and invest in the country and ensure that the investors that are here do not jet out, that they provide the basic amenities that are expected to drive industrialization. These are issues. Your business environment, your social environment. And so for me, it's a redefining moment for ECOWAS. And of course, in the business environment, you have a unit called, or whether a department, as the case may be, business development unit. All they do is to push and expand the frontiers of productivity and how to engage the market share maximally. And I think we need that. And permit me to echo what I mentioned earlier, that ECOWAS is about economy, it's about political well-being of the sub-region. So how well have they performed? So, and these are issues that should be of concern to them now. So whether they are negotiating or whatever they are doing, they should look at the bigger picture. What values have we delivered? What values could we have delivered? What does the future hold for us? How can we be relevant in the future? I mentioned Singapore earlier. Singapore left Malaysia in 1965. Between the space of 1965 to where we are today, through pragmatic and front-line leadership, transformational leadership, that country has been able to come out of the blues to prominence. So the same thing is available. And it should even be better when you have the regional bloc like ECOWAS. That means it's like they say in the scripture that iron sharpens iron. You can leverage on the comparative advantages you have and collaborate to develop your different nations and have a strong bloc. But as it is now, I cannot speak on how strong that bloc is, evaluating it by the impact on the people. I said earlier, if you have really impacted your citizens, they should come out to resist military intervention, actually.
Let's wrap up with this conversation. I'm happy with the fact that you're a legal practitioner, but let's look at the legal angle to this. If these countries, they've decided to exit ECOWAS, are they breaching any law? And then what options are available to ECOWAS? Maybe legal options or alternative are available to ECOWAS in exploring, the provisions of the law in order to resolve this kind of crisis?
Basically, and globally now, military intervention is not permitted. But whether you can legislate, whether you can adjudicate on that in court is a different ballgame. And if that is a possibility, which courts will, are these people even ready to respect the decision of any court? Or will you now say it's only when the previous authority returns to office that they can now say they want to charge them for either mutiny or for treason or whatever? But these guys are in charge now. They are in charge. We've had instances. In 1983, if my history instructs me well, it should be 31st of December, 1983. In Nigeria here, the Second Republic was kicked aside by the Boots. And that was when the immediate past president of Nigeria, Muhammadu Buhari, came in as the military head of state, you see. And you saw that was any action taken. At the end of the day, he came back to become the civilian president in the country. So these are issues. Even if the laws are there, do we implement the laws? But I'm bringing a great solution here now. Can we return to good governance in West Africa? Can we return to good governance, please? Sweden is not talking about coup. Netherlands is not talking about coup. You know what I mean? Switzerland is not talking about coup. Australia is not talking about coup. But we know that different countries have their different challenges. But some of those challenges are enviable challenges, challenges that are brought about by development and not by poverty. And I maintain my position that of West Africa is poverty driven, and it's quite nauseating. I mean, it's an I'm seeking for an adjective to use. It's an aspersion on leadership in West Africa, and I say that with all due respect. If today we still go for medical tourism out of West Africa to other countries, even those who came to colonize us, I doubt if we have succeeded so much in developing the region. You see, we are so, consumption eccentric. We import. Like I said earlier.
Ologun Esquire for being with us on Early Exchange today. Wish we had more time to look at this. Even the military leaders of this countries, how much of development and satisfaction can they bring to the people? But that will be a conversation for another time. Thank you for being on Early Exchange again.
Thank you. God bless Nigeria. God bless West Africa.
All right, that's been the show today. Thank you for your time with us. We ask that you join again tomorrow, 8 a.m. West African time. Now, if you missed the show, perhaps you just joined now, you can get to the beginning when you go to our channel on YouTube, watch again. But the conversation doesn't end on this table. You can always share your thoughts, leave a message at the comment section, or you go to any of our social media platform on Facebook or on Instagram at Souq News, and we'll appreciate your contribution. I am Blessing H. There's so many wonderful programs to make your day on Early Exchange. Market Insight comes up at 11. There will be sports at noon, and then Souq Pulse comes up at 4 o'clock. So many of the programs. So just ensure that you leave it locked on Souq News so you can be updated on current happenings and get the information you need to make the smart move for your business and even for your personal life. Femi?
Yes, and from me to you, maximize today, because there's no particular day called tomorrow. Don't forget, Early Exchange returns tomorrow. I am Femi Ayodele. Bye for now.
I'm okay.
My name is Raymond Bola Brown.
Hi, my name is Fred Amata, and you are on to Souq News.
If you are watching this channel for the first time, make sure you continue to watch it, because this is Souq News.
Shout out to Souq News. Actually, I don't know. I really enjoyed the little moment I spent with you, and I think with more of this.
Souq News. Here's the Souq News, who had the courage to transcend a locked off camera and actually have a conversation with a human being. It's a pleasure, Souq News. Thank you very much.